We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. As the G7 summit finishes, what now for Boris Johnson as he travels to NATO? And could we be heading for a second Scottish independence referendum? Nicola Sturgeon is planning to push for one. And we're talking NHS dentistry. When did you last see a dentist? It's getting harder and harder, isn't it? We're also talking about sexual violence, diabetes and child murders. First, it is your news with Rosie.
Good afternoon to you. It's 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. 36 people are still missing following a Russian missile strike on a shopping centre in Ukraine. Local authorities report at least 18 people are dead and 25 have been hospitalised after the attack in the city of Kremenchuk. Emergency crews are still searching through rubble looking for survivors. President Zelensky says it's one of the most daring terrorist acts in the history of Europe.
Before air raid sirens, there were about 1,000 people there. Fortunately, as far as it's known, for now, many people managed to escape. They were taken out, but there were still people inside, workers, some visitors. Only absolute psycho terrorists, who should have no place on Earth, can launch missiles at such an object. And it's not an incidental hit by missiles. It is a precision Russian strike, exactly on this shopping centre.
The G7 leaders have promised to continue imposing severe and enduring costs on Russia to try to help bring an end to the war. Well, Boris Johnson's travelling to Madrid this afternoon for the start of the NATO summit as the G7 comes to a close. Well, meanwhile, the government has announced nearly £10 million to help Ukrainian scientists continue with their research. Technology Minister Chris Philp told us Britain is supporting all aspects of Ukraine's economy.
The £10 million we're specifically announcing today, which is on top of the £1.3 billion of assistance already provided, is specifically to help to bring Ukrainian researchers over to the UK so they can continue their scientific research while the conflict is ongoing, to make sure that scientific research doesn't get interrupted.
In the US, the bodies of 46 migrants have been found in an abandoned truck in Texas near the Mexican border. Police say 3 people are now in custody. San Antonio's fire chief says 16 others, including 4 children, were found alive and were being treated.
Fortunately, we were able to transport 16 people. 12 of those are adults and 4 pediatric. All of them were conscious at the time upon transportation. The patients that we saw were hot to the touch. They were suffering from heat stroke, heat exhaustion, no signs of water in the vehicle. It was a refrigerated tractor trailer, but there was no visible working AC unit on that rig.
Scotland's First Minister will set out how she believes a second independence referendum could go ahead if Westminster continues to block her plans. Nicola Sturgeon insists that her party's victory in 2021 gives her a mandate for another referendum. She wants it to take place before the end of next year. The Prime Minister can green-light a referendum, but none has done so since 2014. Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, has criticised the Prime Minister's plan to effectively scrap parts of the Brexit deal through the Northern Ireland Protocol, which cleared its first Commons hurdle last night. Well, the Prime Minister says removing checks on goods travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will help safeguard the Good Friday Agreement. But the Labour leader says that can be achieved without abandoning the protocol.
There's a business Brexit working group in Belfast. They've got 14 practical things that could be done to make the protocol work, and they just say to the government, grow up and get on with it. And that's what a Labour government would do: grow up, get on with it, resolve the issue, not play around with the idea of ripping up the protocol that you negotiate. Nobody, by the way, in either Dublin or Northern Ireland believes the Prime Minister when he says, I didn't really know what I was negotiating, it's being interpreted differently. They think he knew what he was doing, he missold it, and he's not telling the truth now.
Serious sexual and violent offenders could be kept in prison for longer as new changes to the law come into force today. Whole life sentences are now the starting point for premeditated child murder, and life in prison is now mandatory for the unlawful killing of emergency workers on duty. Firefighters across the UK could go on strike after receiving an offer of a 2% pay rise. The Fire Brigades Union described the proposal as insulting, and they said they'll recommend its members turn it down. The union says firefighters' wages have been cut by 12% in real terms between 2009 and 2021. Discussions will now be held to decide whether to go ahead with the industrial action. You're now up to date on GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, as the G7 ends and leaders move to Madrid for NATO, our reporter will bring us the latest. Here at home, there's a crisis in NHS dentistry, as dentists face a huge backlog. 10% of English dentists left the NHS in the last year. I'll discuss that with Conservative MP Derek Thomas, who's campaigning on this. It was meant to be a once-in-a-generation event, but just 8 years on from the last one, Nicola Sturgeon will today announce plans to move forward through a second Scottish referendum. Has she any chance of getting it through? We'll be live in Scotland, and I'll discuss this with Scottish Conservative MP Andrew Bowie. Liberal Democrat MP Layla Moran joins me to discuss sexual violence, as universities are urged to ban non-disclosure agreements to keep students quiet who say they've been attacked. We're also discussing child murders and diabetes too. And as always, I want to hear from you. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. The Prime Minister is due to head to Madrid, where leaders from NATO's 30 countries will meet to discuss the war in Ukraine. There are reports this morning that the Prime Minister will announce an increase in defence spending to 2.5% of GDP and urge other nations to do the same in order to stand up to Russia. The Prime Minister is heading there from the G7 summit in the German Alps. GB News reporter Paul Hawkins is there. Paul, bring us up to date.
So in the last sort of half an hour or so, we've had a communique issued by the G7 leaders. It's kind of like an upsum of what they've agreed on. And we already know that the UK, the USA, Japan and Canada are going to introduce a ban on the import of Russian gold, that being Russia's second biggest export. So the idea is to harm Russian revenues, which is how they're funding the war in Ukraine. But they've now said that they're going to work on a price cap for Russian oil as well. And the group are considering a ban on transporting Russian oil that is sold above a certain price. They're calling on all countries to avoid excessive stockpiling of food, which can lead to further price increases. They're asking countries and private companies to stop stockpiling food and that to make it available without distorting the price of it on the market. And they've pledged Note the word pledged and promised, not actually legally committed to, but they've pledged an additional $4.5 billion to combat global food insecurity, and that brings the total sum committed this year by the G7 to $14 billion. So very much they're trying to cut off the money that Russia has to fund its war, and we already know that they have agreed to continue to supply the Ukrainians with arms, with money, and that they are there for the long course, they say. So that's what's been agreed here at the G7 so far. We've also heard from the Russian Defence Ministry. That's Russia's first official comments about that strike on that shopping centre, that missile strike. The Russian Defence Ministry saying it did carry out the strike, but it says the fire that ensued was caused by the detonation of ammunition that was stored there. Ukraine says, Ukraine says that the shopping centre indeed was of no strategic threat to Russia, and that there was absolutely no reason for striking the depot. We do know that 18 people have died in that, 36 people are missing. There were up to 1,000 people, we think, inside that shopping centre, so that the death toll could well increase. And just so you know, Gloria, there's another train just leaving the station next to me, and it's about to sound off a whistle. It always does, and that always interrupts us. But just so you know what that noise is that is coming down the track in a matter of seconds.
Thank you for that, Paul. Thanks for the update, Paul. Speak soon.
No problem.
Now, do you have an NHS dentist? And if you're lucky enough to have one, can you get an appointment to see them? It's getting harder, and 10% of NHS dentists in England quit in the last year alone. Well, Conservative MP for West Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, Derek Thomas, led a parliamentary debate on this last week. He's been campaigning on it for a while, and I'm delighted he joins me in the studio now. Hello, Derek. So, as I said, you've been campaigning on the issue of NHS dentists for a long time. You had this debate in Parliament last week. It's obviously a national issue because loads of other MPs came out to speak in this debate. What's the problem?
Good afternoon, Gloria. Well, the problem is, and as you say, I've been campaigning on this for years, is that you have a generation of young people, children, who are not seeing a dentist, and we really are concerned about their oral health going forward. And that will only end up in more challenges for NHS services and dentists going forward, but also a number of adults who live with horrible pain, all sorts of oral problems, but just can't get access to a dentist, whatever they try. And
I know that you surveyed your constituents on this issue, and you said it was the biggest response in the quickest time that you'd ever had to asking your constituents what they thought on particular issues. Did any particular stories stand out for you from those constituents?
Well, I've heard, since I've been MP for 7 years, I've heard lots of stories from people about getting access to a dentist, but it's really got difficult in the last couple of years. So in January of this year, I thought, well, actually, I'll really try and find out what the examples were and then give those to the NHS so they actually have an understanding of the scale of the problem. We've got people that travel abroad a long way to get dental treatment. We've got people that are pulling out their own teeth. One lady rupturing her own abscess, really horrendous examples. One lady who only chews on one side of her face, and this isn't a weekend problem, but that has been for a long time. And the difficulty seems to be that in the way that the dentists are paid and supported through the NHS contract, it's just not viable for them to concentrate their efforts on the NHS dentistry. So that's what we're trying to fix.
Now, Labour say in 2010, the government, your party, promised to introduce a new dentistry contract. In 2017, they promised to introduce a new dentistry contract. And the minister who responded to you when you were putting this point, she said she would introduce a new dentistry contract.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've had that promise. So I've been, as you say, working on this for a long time, and there were lots of efforts in recent years when myself and colleagues in Cornwall were raising this, where they would look to tweak the contract or try and find specific things to address the problem in Cornwall, because it is acute in Cornwall. But it was this year, finally, that we've got Minister Maria Caulfield saying, actually, you're right, the contract is another problem, and that's what we need to address. And they are doing it. There's work being done now to bring dentists and various individuals in NHS together. And you know, as well as I do, Gloria, about how difficult it is to get a contract resolved where we can reward professionals and their staff for treating NHS patients. It's really tricky to do, and if it was easy, we would have done it. But it's worth pointing out that we have the same problem in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in Wales and in England. So it's not unique to this particular, to just NHS England.
And what about the huge number, 2,000 of dentists quitting the NHS last year? That's around 10% of all dentists employed.
Well, it all goes down to what they call the UDA. So the dentists are paid for units of dental activity. They're paid quite a small amount of money. It was a contract that was set up in 2006. It's in badly need of reform. But they're rewarded quite a small amount of money that pays for them, their staff, their practice to carry out these units of dental activity. There's no way that that's viable for a dentist, so they then have to chop that up with private care. And actually, they end up seeing a lot of NHS patients in the course of a day. They're not able to give the time they want to an NHS patient. And so I fully understand why dentists are moving away from providing NHS dental care.
Just to ask you about the broader issues of politics, you abstained last night on the government's proposals to change the Northern Ireland protocol. So did Boris Johnson, but he was away, and so did Rishi Sunak, and he was obviously otherwise engaged. 72 Conservative MPs didn't vote. Did you have other business, or should we put a bit more to it?
I wasn't in Parliament. I had a family situation at home, which wasn't a negative, but I was at home in Cornwall and travelled up this morning. But actually, I agree that we must do something. It can't be right that the people of Northern Ireland can't enjoy the same support during the cost of living as people in England can, or the rest of the UK. It can't be right that Great Britain can have different tax arrangements for people living in Northern Ireland. So I agree that something must be done, and hopefully it will be enough to get the Brussels and the British government around the table again.
Final question to you. Those two by-elections last week. Lots of your colleagues voted for Boris Johnson because they thought he was an election winner. He's not an election winner if last week was anything to go by.
Well, Gloria, I'll be really honest with you. I've spent 4 separate occasions in Tiverton and Honiton doing what I can to make sure we keep that as a Conservative seat. And unfortunately, on the door, every door where Conservative voters were choosing to stay at home, it was a concern about what was going on number 10, how the Prime Minister was leading government. It wasn't actually about Partygate. It was just about they needed a clear vision about what we're doing and really be on top of the greater challenges that face people here in the UK. And I think, unfortunately, that came across door after door after door.
Would you like him to lead you into the next election?
Well, I voted no. I voted for the no confidence motion, and my personal view is that we do need a change of leadership. He has massive talents, but unfortunately, I think we've got to get someone who can bring some really clear clarity about what Conservative values are and the kind of things that I stood for a long time ago now.
You can't be challenged for a year. Those rules could be changed, couldn't they?
That's fine. He has my support, and I will work with him to deliver what I can for West Cornwall and the rest of the country until that opportunity arises.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Derek. Good luck with your campaign on sorting out NHS dentistry. There'll be lots of people who are absolutely full square behind you on that. Thanks you for
Gloria.
your time. Thank you. Now, Nicola Sturgeon is going to outline her plans for how to get to a second Scottish referendum this afternoon. Of course, the last one was only in 2014. Our Scottish reporter will be with us next, and I'll be talking with Scottish Conservative MP Andrew Bowie a little later. Before that, it is time for your weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. A bit of an east-west split today. Much of eastern England, fine, bright, pleasant summer's day. Further west, there's a fair bit of rain around and some gusty winds, and here's the reason why. This slow-moving area of low pressure, the isobars squeezing together, really blustery, especially on some of these Irish sea coasts, and this weather front has made for a very wet start across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. The rain easing from Northern Ireland, but persisting in western Scotland, in the southwest, Dumfries and Galloway, to be specific. We do have a warning in place. Rain will spread into western parts of Wales and eventually southwest England, whereas much of the Midlands staying dry. Sunny spells across East Anglia in the southeast and northeast Scotland. And in the east, top temperatures 23, maybe 24 Celsius. It's much cooler further west. Some heavy showers breaking out once that rain has cleared from Northern Ireland, and they'll move into parts of western Scotland for a time through the evening. The rain should ease across the southwest of Scotland, and then it kind of lingers overnight across the Midlands and northeast England. Temperatures staying generally in double digits, many towns and cities staying in the teens, staying a little cooler perhaps further west. On to the details for Wednesday. A bit of a messy one. We'll have this line of cloud across parts of eastern England, but East Anglia may well stay dry and bright. And then we're looking at showers breaking out and coming quite heavy actually by the afternoon, particularly over northern England and eastern parts of Scotland. Scattered showers too for Wales and southwest England, but they will be scattered and many places won't see too many showers, stay dry and bright with a bit of sunshine, and temperatures again creeping into the low 20s, so feeling perhaps a little warmer. Certainly a brighter day tomorrow across southwest Scotland. Still a potential for more heavy showers to develop as we go through Wednesday night and certainly into Thursday. More heavy downpours close to this area of low pressure. But there are signs of high pressure moving in and bringing drier weather as we head towards the weekend, certainly across the south.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
We are now going to a report from Alice Porter on the day of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial.
How could a British socialite end up in an American prison because of trafficking underage girls for sex? The case all goes back to Ghislaine Maxwell's relationship with disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. She was his girlfriend and employee during the 90s, but her true role was far more sinister. She recruited and groomed teenagers for Epstein to molest in massage rooms between 1994 and 2004. When charges were first announced against Maxwell 2 years ago by the US Attorney Audrey Strauss, she argued that Maxwell was integral to Epstein's sex trafficking ring.
Maxwell was among Epstein's closest associates and helped him exploit girls who were as young as 14 years old. Maxwell played a critical role in helping Epstein to identify, befriend, and groom minor victims for abuse. In some cases, Maxwell participated in the abuse herself.
One of the alleged victims who has been most public in her criticism of Maxwell was Virginia Giuffre. She said Maxwell trained her as a sex slave and accused Prince Andrew of repeatedly sexually abusing her when she was 17, including at Maxwell's home in London.
Before he abused me, when we just met, Gielan does this guessing game and he guessed right. I was 17 and he compared me to his daughters, saying, oh, my daughters are a few years younger than you.
Virginia Giuffre reached an out-of-court settlement with the Duke of York in February. He has not been charged with any crimes and denies the accusations. During Maxwell's trial, testimonies were heard from 4 women who described being abused by Epstein. But Maxwell has always maintained her innocence. Her legal team argued that she was used as a scapegoat for Epstein after the government failed to prevent his suicide in prison while awaiting trial. But jurors were not convinced. And in December, she was convicted on 5 criminal counts. Damian Williams was the US attorney.
I want to commend the bravery of the girls, now grown women, who stepped out of the shadows and into the courtroom. Their courage and willingness to face their abuser made today's result and this case possible.
With a 55-year prison sentence looming ahead, it's no surprise that Maxwell has been put on suicide watch. But for the victims of Epstein and Maxwell, her sentencing means that justice has finally been served. Alice Porter, GB News.
Now, sexual violence is a huge problem. It's been talked about more. But sometimes survivors face pressure to keep quiet about it. Recently emerged that an Oxford University college threatened to expel a student if she went public with her claim that she'd been violently raped by a fellow student. Now, the Liberal Democrat MP, Layla Moran, who represents Oxford West and Abingdon, is working to get colleges to sign a pledge promising not to ask students to sign non-disclosure agreements. And she joins me now. Layla, great to see you. You have this parliamentary debate on this tomorrow. Just explain the thinking behind this Can't Buy My Silence campaign you're leading.
Thank you. So I was first approached by this by survivors in various colleges. One has gone very public, but actually it's worth saying it's not just one college, it's several colleges. And in fact, since then I've been contacted by others in other universities. And it's young women who have been sexually abused, sexually harassed. They sign non-contact agreements with their college, which say that the perpetrator and them can't, for example, meet in the dining halls, and they're happy for that. But in there is a gagging clause, and they feel that unless they sign up to the whole of this non-contact agreement, which includes these gagging clauses, that they will then not be protected. So in one of them I saw, it says that you're not allowed to speak to anyone, but especially the press, about what's happening to you. And what the young women tell me is that they feel silenced, they feel that this is abuse on top of more abuse, they can't get the help that they seek. One told me she was worried if she went to her GP to get help that she would be expelled. And so what I'm campaigning for now is to have non-disclosure agreements banned in their entirety from universities, and that's what the Can't Buy My Silence NDA pledge is all about.
Covering up sexual abuse, it's not restricted to universities, is it, sadly? What do you say to those who say the focus of your campaign is too narrow?
Well, actually, on that, I'm also working on a much wider suggestion, which we have already met with Priti Patel about. We met her last week. That would mimic legislation that already exists in Prince Edward Island in Canada, which would ban non-disclosure agreements from being used by anyone who doesn't want to use them. And some people say, well, what if the victim does want an NDA? Well, that's not what this is for. But anyone feeling coerced, pressured into signing an NDA, whether at university or indeed in their job or as part of any volunteer organisation, would not be allowed to do that. So we are working on wider legislation. It's not just the ban, it's across the whole of society as well.
We did put your points to the University of Oxford, who say this. I'd be interested in your response. The university does not and will not use NDAs, but they cannot speak on behalf of colleges. In a statement, they said Oxford University cares very deeply about the health and well-being of our students and staff. We condemn all forms of sexual harassment and violence, and supporting victims is a high priority for both the university and colleges. What do you make of that, Layla?
Well, I've heard it before. I mean, look, First of all, there's different parts of the university. The central university doesn't, but actually primarily it's the colleges that will deal with these young women. I have heard back from some. I think we're up to now 3 colleges who have signed it. Others have written their own versions of the statement. I don't mind how they do this, that's fine too. I'm disappointed though in the others who have yet to sign the pledge or to make some kind of a statement. And what I will say to them is I don't understand why you're waiting. It is very, very obvious why. This is just an affront. It should not be happening. It's sickening, quite frankly. And whilst they say they aren't now and won't in the future, actually I've had some evidence that the same ones who say that have done in the past. So I'm glad that we are at least raising awareness about this, but no college, no university, and actually, as you point out, no workplace or organisation in the country should be forcing people to not speak about their sexual harassment or violence.
And just finally, a man has been arrested on suspicion of a murder in East London of a 35-year-old woman. Her name was Zara Alina. The fact is, women are not even safe on their own streets, are they?
No, actually just this weekend I attended a vigil at my local church on femicide, and we read out the 140 women who died last year. We already know that that's going to be up this year. This is a spiralling issue, and what really worries me, Gloria, is when I speak to the young women who are survivors of this sexual violence, they tell me they don't even think that it's worth going to the police because they don't think that the police will investigate thoroughly enough. Therefore, they have their perpetrators out at large in the community. There is a whole systemic change that needs to happen here. Let's face it, we should try and root that out from the bottom up. The NDAs is the symptom, but actually the cause is something much deeper than that, and something that we're also going to be talking about in the course of the debate tomorrow.
It's great to talk to you today, Layla Moran, Liberal Democrat MP. Thanks for your time. We'll be reporting on Nicola Sturgeon's plans for a second referendum in a moment, straight after the news with Rosie.
It's 12:30. Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The Prime Minister and his fellow G7 leaders have accused the Russian president of war crimes. It's after Russian missiles hit a shopping mall in central Ukraine, killing at least 18 people and injuring many more. Boris Johnson's travelling to Madrid this afternoon for the start of the NATO summit as the G7 comes to a close. The new head of the British Army says the UK and its NATO allies must be unequivocally prepared to fight if Russia attacks any of their territory. Speaking at a warfare conference in London, General Sir Patrick Sanders told attendees Russia will be an even greater threat to European security after the war in Ukraine. In the US, the bodies of 46 migrants have been found in an abandoned truck in Texas near the Mexican border. 16 others, including 4 children, were found alive. They're being treated for heat, stroke and exhaustion. Police say 3 people are now in custody. Scotland's First Minister is going to set out this afternoon how she believes a second independence referendum can go ahead if Westminster continues to block her plans. Nicola Sturgeon insists that the SNP's victory in 2021 gives her a mandate for another referendum and wants it to take place before the end of 2023. She's due to make a statement in the Scottish Parliament this afternoon. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now, shortly we'll be back to Gloria and the briefing.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Later this afternoon, Nicola Sturgeon will make a new push for an independent Scotland, laying out her plans on how to hold a second referendum on Scottish independence. Even if Westminster won't give her the legal power to do so, our Scotland reporter David Donaldson is in Edinburgh for us. Davy, hi.
Hi.
What's
yes,
happening
Gloria,
today?
Certainly, Nicola Sturgeon will be taking. Yeah, she'll be taking to her feet around about 2:20, we think. Here, she obviously earlier this month, she released her first intention to have an Indie Ref 2. I was actually at that media conference, and I have to say it left more questions than answers. A lot of things that she really wasn't clear on, and certainly said she would reveal all later. Whether she'll reveal it this afternoon is anyone's guess, but certainly the key elements here are the hard border with England. She was pressed in that quite strongly in that media conference a couple of weeks ago, and didn't really seem to have many answers for that. Also the costs, a lot of think tanks are saying there's a £3.5 billion shortfall between revenue and spend. So how's it going to actually be paid for? Again, we'll get details of that today. We don't know, but a lot of people that I spoke to out in Edinburgh yesterday had mixed views about Indie Ref 2.
I think there'll be a landslide this time for yes. So just looking forward to that.
I take it obviously you'll be voting in favour of it.
Yes, absolutely.
And what do you say to people that are concerned about how it's going to work and the money as well, apparently £3.5 billion shortfall?
I think that's just propaganda, Tory propaganda.
I am an SNP supporter, however, I'm not for Indie Ref 2. Was all for it, Indie Ref 1, but I think they could do with spending the money elsewhere.
I'm all for it. I'm a member of the Sir Alpha Pipes and Drums.
OK, and a lot of people will say that, where's the money coming from and how's it going to work?
We're a rich country. Too poor, too small, too stupid. No.
So, as you can hear, there are mixed views from people, some all for it, some having some apprehension about it as well. And I think a lot of people have said that perhaps the timing isn't right. Douglas Ross comes out and said he's not playing games with the First Minister and says that there's more pressing issues on the table at the moment, and certainly other leaders in Scotland have said that as well. Also, the legality of a referendum has to be tested as well. Nicola Sturgeon says she has a mandate. The UK government dispute that. Obviously, we've got the Section 30, which is a legal term for Scotland to have this right to have a second referendum, which would, if it goes ahead, and that's a big if, go ahead in October next year.
Thank you for the update. Great to talk to you. Thank you, Davy. Well, as we've been hearing, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is due to set out her plans on how to hold a second independence referendum, whether or not the UK government gives it the legal power to do so. I'm joined now by the Conservative MP for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, Andrew Bowie. Andrew, good to see you.
Hi, Gloria.
It's the democratic right. It's the democratic rights of the Scottish people to choose their future. Why are you standing in their way at Westminster?
We're not standing in their way. We just don't think now is particularly the right time to be going down this route, sowing more division, causing more uncertainty at a very time when we're dealing with a cost of living situation where people are genuinely worried about whether they can afford to fill up their cars, put food on the table for their family, whilst we're supporting the government and people of Ukraine against unwarranted aggression by Vladimir Putin. I really don't think this is the time to be causing more uncertainty, sowing division by having a referendum on a question that was asked in 2014, only 8 years ago, and to which the Scottish people overwhelmingly said, no, actually, we want to remain in the United Kingdom. Now is simply not the time.
She would point out that most members of the Scottish Parliament who were elected last year were elected on a mandate to support independence, that there is a democratic mandate to pursue this.
Yeah, that's great for Nicola to say that, but the fact is the Scottish Government, the Scottish Parliament, don't have the legal authority to run or hold a referendum. Back in 2011, when David Cameron, then Prime Minister, agreed to a Section 30 order to give them the power, we were in a very different situation. We weren't in a cost of living crisis. You know, we didn't have a war in Europe ongoing. The fact is we do have these major issues right now, and I think it's grossly irresponsible and a gross dereliction of duty from her part, actually, the First Minister of Scotland, to be embarking on this right now, playing to her base when every poll shows a majority of Scots believe we should remain in the UK, and even those who support independence don't think we should be having the referendum next year. It's inconceivable as to why she's going for this now, other than to play to her base and to curry favour with those people that keep her in power.
Don't know exactly what she's going to say because she's addressing Parliament in a couple of hours' time, about an hour and a half. But there is some speculation that she could hold a referendum asking the Scottish people whether Holyrood, rather than Westminster, should have the power to call future separation votes. Would that persuade you?
No, this is not the time to be playing these silly political games, you know, arguing about the Constitution. For goodness sake, we've got to make devolution work. We've got to focus on the priorities of the Scottish people, which is getting the health service back up to scratch, investing in education, stopping Scotland slip down the league tables in terms of education attainment, by the way, investing in transport infrastructure, rolling out broadband across the country. These are all things for which the First Minister has responsibility in Scotland, and all things on which she is failing. Rather than focus on division, sowing uncertainty and playing to her base, maybe she should focus more time on doing her day job, which is addressing the issues that really face the ordinary Scottish person every day of their lives.
Final question to you, Andrew, if I may. Should the rules be changed to allow a second leadership challenge to the Prime Minister?
Look, we had a vote 2 weeks ago. I obviously very publicly voted against the Prime Minister, but that vote was had. I think we do need to move on now. Don't think the British people would accept it, really, if we in Parliament were to spend all of our time navel-gazing and discussing who would or wouldn't be the best leader of the Conservative Party. As I've just said regarding independence referendum, we need to focus on the big issues that the people out there really care about and the big issues that they're facing every day of their lives. And if we weren't to do that, that would be a gross dereliction of duty on our part. So we've got to focus on what the British people care about. We've got to focus on getting the job done, helping them in their everyday lives, and all this speculation and Westminster tittle-tattle about how the Prime Minister might be removed, if he will be removed, and who might follow. I think that's something that the vast majority of people out there would rather we just shut up about and did our jobs.
Andrew Bowie, always great to talk to you. Thank you for your time today. Now, the murders of Arthur Lavinia Hughes and Star Hobson are being examined by MPs today. Arthur was murdered in June 2020 by his stepmother, Emma Tustin, at their home in Solihull. Star was a one-year-old child who was murdered by her mother's girlfriend, Savannah Brockhill, back in September 2020 in West Yorkshire. Our culture and social affairs editor, Inaya Folarin Iman, joins us now. Hi, Inaya. Just bring us up to date with what's been happening this morning.
So following those tragic murders of Arthur Lavinia Hughes and Star Hudson, there was an independent review into child safeguarding to find out why it seemed that there were several missed opportunities and where institutions seem to have failed to spot some of the devastating signs. So in both of those cases, both happened during the COVID-19 lockdown. And secondly, it was quite striking how grandparents and extended family in both of those cases had reported to services on several different occasions. And on top of that, in the case of Arthur Lavinia Hughes, the school had reported him to mental health services 3 times. And so there were several different visits, several different examinations and photos in both cases, but social services and the police did miss those opportunities. And the Education Select Committee met today at 10 a.m. in order to question many of those who were involved in the social services and the councils at the time. So, for example, in the case of Arthur, that was in Solihull, and that council has been designated inadequate, similar in also Bradford. So many of the recommendations from the review said, for example, that there needs to be a much more coherent multi-agency approach, that many of the different institutions, such as the social services, the schools and the police, were not communicating with one another. They also recommended, for example, designating child leavers as a protected characteristic, and also much more expertise, investment and resourcing into making sure that specialists in this area have the ability to be able to make those complex and challenging decisions. Similarly in these cases, but also in the tragic case of baby P, there was lots of discussions about the fact that there was manipulative parents that were often able to lie and confuse many of those social services. And so much more training is needed to be able to spot these tragic instances.
Please goodness, let's hope some lessons are learned this time. Inaya, thank you. Thanks. Within the past few minutes, the Prime Minister has been speaking to journalists at the close of the G7 in Germany. First, he was asked for his reaction to Russia's fatal attack on a Kyiv shopping centre.
Well, of course, the news broke as we were all in the G7 sessions, and you could feel the whole mood of the meeting become yet more sombre. I think people are just shocked by what Putin is capable of doing. And, if anything, it helped those of us who are making the case for helping to protect the Ukrainians to get that message across to some of those people who are more swing voters in the argument. They can see that this is utter barbarism. And I think one of the things we've seen in this G7 today is a really, really powerful sense of unity and resolve and purpose and absolute determination to keep giving the Ukrainians the help, the support, the wherewithal to keep going.
There's been a strong message on unity, but have you been disappointed there's been a lack of concrete actions on Ukraine?
No, I think today you've just got another $30 billion of humanitarian and economic support for Ukraine, to say nothing of the extraordinary list of material, of equipment that everybody is sending across. And so what people basically agreed on, which I think had been slightly perhaps questioned around the world, but I was never really in doubt in my mind, what we agreed on was to give the Ukrainians the strategic endurance they need to try to shift the dial, to try to change the dynamic of the position. That's what needs to happen. That's what Volodymyr Zelensky wants us to give him.
Now, the new head of the British Army, General Sanders, is saying today that we are the generation that must prepare the army to fight again in Europe. Says we're facing our 1937 moment. That's pretty alarming for viewers to hear. Are we preparing for war with Russia?
I don't think it will come to that, and clearly we're working very hard to make sure that we confine this to Ukraine. I think Putin and the Kremlin are going to try to widen the conflict and to try to say that this is something to do between NATO and Russia. That's not it at all. This is about an invasion of an independent sovereign country. It's about the West and all the friends of Ukraine giving them the support that they need to protect themselves. That's what this is about. Now, when it comes to UK defence spending, clearly we have to respond to the way the threats continue to change. But don't forget, Dominic, that when we've now got a defence budget that's £24 billion bigger under the spending review, the biggest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Last year, the UK was the third biggest defence spender in the world, and we're making massive commitments.
Now, about 400,000 people live with type 1 diabetes in the UK, including the former Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May. Now, she and Labour MP for Knowsley, George Howarth, are working together to work out how the National Health Service can provide better treatment to people who live with the condition. I'm delighted that George Howarth joins me now. Good to see you, George. So you and Theresa May are working together to provide some solutions into how the NHS can better treat type 1 diabetes. Just tell us a bit about who gets and why people get type 1 diabetes.
Well, I mean, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. It's not the same as type 2, which in many cases is lifestyle related. People are born with a predisposition for type 1. And the one particular consequence Theresa May and myself are concerned about is young people with type 1 diabetes, but also with an eating disorder. And what they discover is that by omitting to take their insulin or not taking enough insulin, they can rapidly lose weight. And our concern is that the NHS isn't properly equipped at the moment to provide the integrated care that is necessary. And we're listening to evidence from people who've had the condition or those who are working with them, psychologists, diabetologists and others, to see how that can be improved.
And I'm interested in how you came to work with Theresa May, the former Prime Minister, on this and how she manages her condition.
Well, as far as I can make out, I mean, Theresa herself unusually was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I think she was in her 40s at the time. Normally it's a lot younger, but I think she has access to good technology to support her, and probably, as people could see when she intervened in the chamber on the Northern Ireland Protocol yesterday, she's in good form. So I think she manages well, but she's not, you know, as I'm not complacent about the problems other people face. We think there are potentially 140,000 people with type 1 diabetes and an eating disorder, and they're not getting the sort of treatment they need.
What treatment do they need? How could it be improved?
Well, it could be improved in a lot of ways. I mean, the experience of many of them, and we've taken some evidence already on this, is that they end up bouncing between different medical practitioners. So they'll go and see a diabetologist, they might see a psychologist, they might have somebody checking on the heart condition, they might have someone checking on the feet. And you know, some of them have retinopathy, which is an eye condition, so they end up having that sort of treatment as well. And it means traipsing round a whole series of different hospital departments, and it's almost, for some of them, like a full-time job. So what I hope we're heading towards is a more integrated service where you can go to one department and see all the people that you need to. And there are a couple of experiments going on, a couple of trials, one in London and one in Bournemouth, who are working on that principle, how you do it in two very different areas. So we'll be interested to see the evidence from that as well. And what we're hoping to do is to produce a report that the government will be able to adopt, or at least adopt much of it, to improve that service.
And we are used to seeing politicians of different parties throw brickbats at each other. But as you are showing, actually, there's a lot of cross-party working in Parliament, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And I mean, to be honest, I wasn't someone who knew Theresa May before this particularly well. But when I spoke to her about the problem, she was hugely receptive, could see the value in doing what we're doing on a cross-party basis, and she's been very hopeful about the possibility that we can improve things through this process.
Are you hearing, just final question, unrelated question, we keep reading rumours of possible Conservative MP defections to Labour. Have you got any inside info for us, George?
Sorry to disappoint you, Gloria, but no. Any Conservative MPs, as far as I'm concerned, who want to come and join us would be very welcome. But I haven't heard any discussions, and I'm not even in a position to be able to say, oh, it's him or it's her. I just think, obviously somebody knows something, but I'm afraid I'm not in on the conspiracy.
You can't blame me for having a go, can you, George Howarth? Labour MP, thank you for talking to us today. Now, some of you have been getting in touch while we've been on air. Tony says, allow Sturgeon to have her election on independence with the condition that if the Scottish people vote to remain as part of the UK, then Holyrood should be totally dismantled. Philip says having a majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament does not give her a mandate. She has a majority of MSPs based on a first-past-the-post system, one with less than 50% of votes, i.e. the majority of Scottish voters voted against the SNP, hence the SNP does not have a referendum mandate. And Rob says, dear Gloria, Nicola Sturgeon's independence vote, that was supposed to be a once-in-a-generation vote. That's her quote. Only wants to become Queen of Scotland. She wants to turn Scotland against England as they were in the past. Thank you for getting in touch. Up next, it is On the Money with Liam Halligan. And he's here with me now. Got any cabinet ministers on your show today, Liam?
maybe one or two. No, we did a Michael Gove yesterday. Yeah. Following on from that interview, Michael Gove, he said a lot about the housing industry, he said the big house builders were too dominant, but he also signalled that the government could soon be lifting its moratorium on fracking, that controversial technique for extracting shale gas, which some people think is really the key to our energy security, not least in light of ongoing conflict between Russia and the West, or at least economic conflict. So what we're doing today, Gloria, we've had many people on our show when we were presenting together, also on The Money, who are backing fracking. So what I'm asking today, is fracking really the answer? We've got one of Britain's leading hydrogen technology proponents, a guy who makes cars that run on hydrogen. We were also talking about JCB, who have developed prototypes, those huge yellow diggers, again, running on hydrogen. Should we be jumping away from hydrocarbons, moving to things like hydrogen and other sustainable, renewable forms of energy? It's a controversial area, but it's an area in which we're hearing so much now, given the need to secure our energy security and given those spiralling petrol and diesel prices. £2 to fill up £2 a gallon, £100 to fill up a family car.
Yeah, there is some speculation that the government might act on that again.
Yeah, pretty much any day now.
Right.
Which is why we were going to do this discussion a bit later, but because we're hearing those rumours, we've brought it forward to today, because we're on the money.
Liam, thank you. You've been watching or listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Join me tomorrow at 10 to 12 for Prime Minister's Questions. Now it is time for your weather.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. A bit of an east-west split today. Much of eastern England, fine, bright, pleasant summer's day. Further west, there's a fair bit of rain around and some gusty winds. And here's the reason why. This slow-moving area of low pressure, the isobars squeezing together, really blustery, especially on some of these Irish sea coasts. And this weather front has made for a very wet start across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. The rain easing from Northern Ireland, but persisting in western Scotland, in the southwest. Dumfries and Galloway, to be specific. We do have a warning in place. Rain will spread into western parts of Wales and eventually southwest England, whereas much of the Midlands staying dry. Sunny spells across East Anglia in the southeast and northeast Scotland. And in the east, top temperatures 23, maybe 24 Celsius. It's much cooler further west. Some heavy showers breaking out once that rain has cleared from Northern Ireland, and they'll move into parts of western Scotland for a time through the evening. The rain should ease across the southwest of Scotland, and then it kind of lingers overnight across the Midlands and northeast England. Temperatures staying generally in double digits, many towns and cities staying in the teens, staying a little cooler perhaps further west. On to the details for Wednesday. A bit of a messy one. We'll have this line of cloud across parts of eastern England, but East Anglia may well stay dry and bright. And then we're looking at showers breaking out and coming quite heavy, actually, by the afternoon, particularly over northern England and eastern parts of Scotland. Scattered showers too for Wales and southwest England, but they will be scattered, and many places won't see too many showers. Stay dry and bright with a bit of sunshine. And temperatures again creeping into the low 20s, so feeling perhaps a little warmer. Certainly a brighter day tomorrow across southwest Scotland. Still a potential for more heavy showers to develop as we go through Wednesday night and certainly into Thursday. More heavy downpours close to this area of low pressure. But there are signs of high pressure moving in and bringing drier weather as we head towards the weekend, certainly across the south.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.